Hi, I'm Ed Bacon, the Rector of All Saints Church, Pasadena. Whoever you are and wherever you find yourself on the journey of faith, I hope that you'll find something here that speaks to you. Welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. This is very, very exciting that this many people on a summer Sunday would come together. And I am imputing to you the greatest of intentions, because my sense is that you're as excited as I am about these two new wonderful people. Those of you who've been kind of watching how sausage is made here at All Saints have no doubt noticed that for this entire program year, we've been down 3 priests. And God let us, thank you, God, to hire Francisco Garcia early on, and he now is a deacon, and he will be a priest come January. And then God, in her grace and wisdom, led us to these 2 wonderful priests in order of appearance on the staff, Janine Scanoni and John Depphouse. So let's please welcome them. They both have jobs that we've not had at All Saints. We've needed these positions filled for many years. Janine is the Senior Associate for Congregational Development and Welcome, which means that not only is she going to oversee all of the welcoming ministries at All Saints Church, but she, with her business background and natural intelligence, is going to be helping us develop a system whereby we can stay in touch with everyone who is in touch with us to make sure that they're meaningfully engaged in ministry here or ministry in the world that is about their own spiritual growth and development. And John is overseeing, his official title is Senior Associate for Education and Formation. He will be overseeing how all of us at All Saints Church are educated and formed to be healthy Christians in the 21st century, with a special emphasis on making sure that our children, youth, and families ministry continues to take strides, but also to make sure that all of us are appropriately challenged to keep evolving in our own life as healthy, religious, spiritual people at All Saints Church. So, Janine is open for business now. John will be open for business come July 30. He and his wife and 2 kids just had their last Sunday at St. James, South Pasadena, last Sunday. And so I've asked John to make sure he's deeply rested before he comes to All Saints Church, which of course is a walk in the park, but I still think that it'd be good for him to be rested before he comes. So I just want this to be a time when they tell us a little bit about themselves and you ask any questions that you want to ask. So I want to start, I'm just going to throw out a couple of 3 questions at the beginning before we open it up to your questions and answers. And my first question to each of you is to kind of talk about why All Saints Church. What attracted you to come and play with us here? Emphasis on play more than work.
What attracted me to All Saints Church, and I should let you know, because this came up when I came out here to interview, I didn't really know anything at all about your reputation when I flew out here in May to meet with you.
That's in her favor.
That is, and it was totally in my favor. What attracted me to you was that I saw the job description, and I saw that you were trying to do something that a lot of churches talk about doing but hadn't quite hit the ground running to do yet, which is that you are trying to reach out to people in new ways. In a large church setting, it's very hard for people to get a grip. And in the ministry world, to find community, the equivalent of small church community, but in a place that they find vibrant and exciting. So I was attracted to that. I was attracted to the fact that you needed somebody to wrestle a big problem, something that would require both analysis, a lot of collaboration, and implementation with many hands being involved. I've been very interested in churches that are trying to do something new, to radically change the way they welcome and empower others to basically do ministry and experience growth in the church environment. And your social justice ministry. When I looked at the website, then I figured out who you were, and I said, oh, that, All Saints Pasadena. And I vaguely remembered I read about your history, I read about your building plans, I read about all of that, and got very excited. And then I saw your Latino ministry, your 1 p.m. service on the web, and then I said, I have to go there. Because one of the deep passions, well, I hope they let me go there. Because one of the deep passions of my heart is that I feel that the church should be doing a better job, the Episcopal Church should be doing a better job to reaching out to our Latino and Latino brothers and sisters who speak Spanish. It is a beautiful language for me to pray in, and I very much wanted to be a part of it. And then I met you, and I fell in love with you, and that's when I knew this is the place.
Thanks.
Well, for me, I think coming to All Saints was, there's a lot of words that I would describe it. Sort of a convergence of my life, an integration, an expansion, all at the same time. I've been in Pasadena since 2003, roughly, with a 2-year stint out in the Washington, D.C. area. And so I've built many relationships in this area. I served in South Pasadena for the past 4 years, and All Saints has always been in my awareness or purview, but I've never really been inside that much. And when this opportunity arose as it did, it was truly a stars aligning kind of moment. And once my eyes got inside this place, it was kind of a wow. I mean, who wouldn't be drawn to here? Well, I'm sure there's a few people that are not drawn to All Saints. But that's right.
We do love
That's right. I'm absolutely amazed and stunned by the dynamism, the energy, the life, the growth here. And it's really in connection with my relationships and life here in the Pasadena area for the past several years, it's just a really, really exciting place to serve, to keep our family anchored down for as long as we can. We've been here for a number of years. My wife and one of my children is sitting right in the back there. I have to just point them out for a moment.
Welcome.
Yeah. So thrilled to be here. I'll save a few more answers to other questions, but drawn to All Saints on every level I could think of right now.
Thanks, both. Welcome. So all of us are, on one level, interested in spiritual journeys here and how people get from their childhood to this amazing place. Janine, you grew up in Northern California, in the Bay Area, as a good Roman Catholic girl. And John, you grew up in Western Michigan in the Dutch Reformed Church. So you represent evangelicalism at its best. And Janine, you represent Roman Catholicism at its best. And you detoured into Buddhism for a while as well. So I think all of us are really curious about those journeys. So Janine, if you'll start and just kind of talk about that formation as a Catholic, and then your journey into the Episcopal priesthood.
Sure. I grew up in a large Italian Catholic family. My entire extended family lives around the Bay Area and spent all the holidays with those family members, went to everybody's first communions, baptisms, confirmations, weddings, funerals. We went to church every Sunday and every holy day of obligation. We stayed home on Good Friday and said the rosary. We fasted on Fridays during Lent. We were very Catholic, and I was a good little Catholic girl. I went to public schools, and so I went to catechism or CCD every week, Wednesdays, instead of soccer practice. And something was wrong. And what was wrong was that they wouldn't let me be an altar server because girls weren't allowed. And then I looked up at the altar, and I saw the priest up there in the very lacy surplice, and I thought, I'm supposed to be there. When he was consecrating the Eucharist, I kept thinking, I'm supposed to be up there. And that's when I started getting discussions about why girls can't do this and why girls can't do that. This feeling continued. I chose to be confirmed in the Catholic Church, but it kept going on. And when I was 19, because I was so devout, somebody said, have you thought of being a nun? And I said, no. And then I said, but I would be a priest. And I threw a copy of St. Augustine's Confessions against the wall. I was 19. And I kept thinking I'd walk into church vestibules and they'd have these brochures of young men in lovely collars and they'd say, do you feel called to serve? And I'd go, yeah, but there's something wrong with that picture. I got married, I had a child, I got divorced. And all during this time there was this strange yearning for religious life that I could not explain. I had not experienced community in the Catholic Church. No help when my mother died when I was 17. No community when my father died. No community when my brother was sick. No community during my divorce. No support. And so I finally sought solace in Buddhism. I read Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by Shunryu Suzuki. Wonderful book. And I began sitting in a Zen manner, and I found it very easy to empty my mind and experience no mind. And I thought, this is great. And every time I did that, Jesus would appear. I'm like, oh, there he is again. So I said, okay, but not church, because church doesn't work. And I eventually did go back to church. And then finally, on Pentecost 2003, I was in church one Sunday, and I saw that every single lay minister in the room was a woman. And I blew up inside. I just exploded inside. And I went to an Episcopal church the next Sunday, and that's when I realized you were in the wrong church. You're called to be a priest. And you're called to be a priest in the church that recognizes the spiritual gifts of women. I've never turned back, and I partly serve this church, the Episcopal Church, because it's a church that gave me my vocation, community, this community and that community, all of it, in one fell swoop.
I grew up in a little city in West Michigan called Muskegon, Michigan, and I was in the Christian Reformed Church. If you're in West Michigan, you have some connection to Dutch Reform in some kind of way. I was in the Christian Reformed Church. My grandmother was the first female deacon of the church that I grew up in, and this church opted to stay in the city, in the more urban center, where a number of other churches were heading out to the suburbs where they would be more successful and such. And I grew up in the food pantry with my grandma as she handed out food to those in the neighborhood. So this was just kind of part of the landscape of my eyes. And it was through her, through a solid upbringing, through just acts of service that were all around me, that it just began to shape my journey of giving and extending myself to others in ministry. And it was after my college days in West Michigan. I was in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I was in a number of evangelical churches. I went to a Vineyard church. I went to another Christian Reformed church. I went to a big church called Mars Hill. Maybe some of you know Rob Bell. He was the pastor of this church. I was there for a few years, and then I went out to Fuller Seminary right across the street from here. So I came out in the School of Cross-Cultural Studies expecting to be a missionary of some kind, because that's the most heroic thing you do in that stage of the church, is you become a missionary and go to Africa or something of that nature. And so I was trained and studied in urban mission, particularly in cross-cultural studies. I met my wife, who had just come back from the Peace Corps not long before that, and so our worlds came together in exciting ways, and we were open to go where God led us. And so I was serving in a nonprofit for mentoring at-risk kids in Northwest Pasadena. This was after my time in seminary, and I could not get the language and vision of the church out of my veins. It was just in there. I wanted to communicate theologically. I wanted to communicate and cast vision and shape community in God and Christ. And then at this point, I was also a music director at a church in Arcadia, and I had sort of lost my sense of really where I was connected deeply and personally into the church. And I had been limitedly exposed in the Episcopal Church, and I came into St. James in South Pasadena, was exposed to the liturgy. From the first service I went to, it was sort of an oasis, a home. It was a sense of discovery of something that had been there for a long time, and you just kind of come into that and get some more language to what you're trying to fumble through all these years. And so it was not long after that the wind of the Spirit blew even further, and I entered the ordination process went out to Virginia Theological Seminary for a couple of years and got a Master of Divinity there, and came back here to South Pasadena, where I've served for the past 4 years, and that's how I've kind of come to this point through our relations together with Ed, and this is kind of the moment that we're at right now.
So both of these folks turn out to be jocks. They're both endurance athletes. And I thought you'd like to know something about what role that plays in their life and in their health and in their spirituality. Because I think their coming on board offers us a great opportunity to talk about the importance of mind, body, spirit, and the fact that the body is a sacrament. And so I'd love for them to talk a little bit about endurance athleticism.
Sure. I had been a runner as a young woman, even through my pregnancy. And then after my divorce, I would go to work and come home to a baby who needed her mom, and so I didn't exercise, and I gained 8 pounds per year. I used to weigh 40 pounds more than this. And then when I joined the Episcopal Church, believe it or not, I started running. And starting, I mean, you know, when you have that much extra weight on you, you have to run less miles. So I'd go out for a 20-minute run and hurt, and then I'd go out for a 22-minute run, and then finally got to where I was running 7 miles about every run I went. And I was teaching at a community college, and I was getting bored with my run. Like, how do you make this more interesting? And somebody said, oh, you should talk to Jeanette. She's a former Olympic marathoner. And she teaches a marathon class. And I said, oh, I could never run a marathon. That's too far, and it's also just crazy. And so they said, no, go talk to her. So I told her what I was doing, and she goes, you just go out and run? I said, yeah, and I actually pray when I run. I find it deeply spiritual, and sometimes I work through problems, but by the end of the run, they're gone, and I'm praying most of the time I'm running. And she goes, well, I don't know about the prayer, but she goes, that's just junk miles. Like, if you don't have a goal you're working towards, those are just junk miles. So I took the marathon class thinking there's no way this is ever going to work. And it turned out I was one of the fastest people in the class. I was a middle-aged woman running around with 22-year-old guys from the college. I run like a rabbit, they say. I have a very fast pace. So I did the marathon, and then I did it again the next year. And then I found it harder to get more miles in when I was back east, because it's just cold and icy for much of the year. And it's also not as beautiful. So I did some more 10Ks and half marathons. But what I found is that in the training, which is for me usually done alone, is a time of contemplation. Actually, I call it body prayer. So does Catherine Jefferts Shorey. She runs and prays. I don't necessarily have to be talking to God, but I'm very attuned to creation. I don't wear an iPod because then I can't hear the wind and the birds. But when I'm in a race, I'm not going to win, so I don't try to win. I am communing with the other people, the people who are watching and the people I'm running with. That's why I like the mid-pace races like the 10Ks and the half marathons, because people are relaxed. And the 5Ks, they're all little nervous rabbits just trying to win it. And the marathon, it is a party, because you know you're going to be out there for a while, so you might as well enjoy it. So I found it to be both contemplative and communal. And I think it was the first time I really understood my body as a sacrament, is when I committed to training my body regularly.
I was a sprinter in college. The furthest distance I had ran was about 800 meters in a race, and that's 2 laps around the track. And then my first 2 years, actually my first year of seminary, I ran a marathon. I said that sounded like a good idea to me. So there was a group that was training for a marathon, and so I went out and ran a nice slow marathon my first year of seminary. And in 2006, my wife, for a birthday present, signed me up for a triathlon in Long Beach. Yeah. Oh, it gets worse. It gets worse. A year later, she signed us both up for an Ironman triathlon. You get a little glimpse inside our marriage together here. So I started out running a couple marathons, took on triathlons, and this is just a regular part of life. I'm doing a lot of biking now. I'm doing a big bike ride in October from San Francisco to Los Angeles over the course of 6 days on behalf of pediatric cancer. So biking is kind of my thing right now, although I'm still running as well. But I concur everything that Janine said. For me, running is like prayer. And sometimes there's some verbal thoughts and prayers that go out, but running is like, if I'm stressed, that is the way that I am relieved of stress. It's just to go out and physically move. I carry stress physically, so there is just something that happens. I think we're people who are made to move. We're physical beings, and that's another thing I love in terms of formation here. There's many churches where there's sort of a loss of the mind-body connection, and yet here we are in the flesh, and so I celebrate that, and being physical for me is just part of life and joy, and I hope to integrate that kind of thinking into formation here at All Saints, so thank you.
So, John, there's a lot of publicity out there about the fact that you and Sarah lived with cancer this past year, and that was one of the conversations that John and I had at our spring clergy conference that really grew into a deeper conversation about whether or not he should apply for this job. And I think it would be just in the service of kind of full disclosure for you to kind of talk a little bit about that, if you will.
Absolutely. Yeah, in early October of 2012, I was diagnosed with a really rare kind of sarcoma cancer called rhabdomyosarcoma. I had a golf ball-sized tumor in my left gluteal muscle. How's that for details? Is that enough for us all? And if you look on Google on the statistics on this one, it doesn't look very promising. But fortunately, it was a really early detection, seemingly, and I went through 6 months of treatment of radiation and surgery and chemo, which just ended about 4 months ago. So this is pretty fresh. Hair's coming back, and we're feeling good. And I actually did a lot of endurance athletics in the midst of the treatment where I was not in chemo. There was a time when I felt really well, and that really helped me get through. But yeah, there's so much I could reflect on through my cancer treatment experience, but I'll just say one word about the mortality piece. I mean, most of us assume, or at least I assume, that I'm going to live until I'm 80 or 90 years old and die peacefully in my bed, and all will be well, and life is well lived. And I really got a good, hard reality check that that's obviously not the case for many, many, many of us. And so for me to consider how that kind of brush with mortality will shape my life and ministry is an ongoing process and meditation for me, and I think I'm just beginning to look at that. And so for any of you who have known about this journey and have offered even a thought or a prayer, I am grateful. I've had these moments where if I could see into the realm of all of the saints who were upholding and supporting me, I think it would probably knock me over. Like, it would be too much to stand. And so I'm grateful for this community and the way you've prayed for me and any others in this journey. But there's so much more to share on this. I hope I'll have more opportunity to reflect on my treatment experience, because there's so much rich stuff that happened in the midst of it. So,
deal. Let's open it up to questions. We give it a microphone. Please raise your hand, and we'll get the mic. Actually, take this. Yeah. Right. So please raise your hand, and let's get a mic to you real fast. Let's start the questions. Thanks very much, Frank. No questions? In the very back, there's one right there. And come on over on this side. There's one for Joseph. Okay. Cynthia, why don't you start?
I understand you're both musicians. Tell us about that.
In my good little Catholic childhood, I learned to play the piano. Very hungry for it. Our grandmother gave us, or my family was pretty poor, and my grandmother gave us a baby grand piano. And so I started plinking and plunking until finally in 4th grade I got lessons. And then I'm trying to remember what triggered it, but in my 30s, my father died. And right at the time when I had bought a piano again, So I wanted to get back to it. And there was something wrong when I was playing the piano. I would get pain in my wrists, and I didn't know what was wrong. So I went to a local music school, and I just happened upon a wonderful music instructor named John Robinson, a classical pianist who had trained with some famous German whose name I've forgotten. And he said, well, you're too tense. You need to totally redo your technique. You need to start with the C major scale. And if you know the piano, you know that da 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 da, really slow. And I'm like, no. But I did. And in fact, I studied seriously for 2.5 more years and became a pretty accomplished classical pianist, kind of at the conservatory level. And I sing. I've sung in church choirs in Catholic churches and Episcopal churches for about 15 years and conducted church choirs.
I had a really high-pitched voice as a young boy, and I sang in youth choirs, and I continued to sing in choirs through high school, but I really always wanted to play the guitar. So my first year of college, I picked up the guitar and kind of self-taught on the guitar. I wouldn't call myself a finely classically trained musician by any means, but I have, in the past few years, composed a lot of sort of creative liturgical songs, kind of ancient future kind of church music. There's lots of different ways to describe it, and I've been able to share some of that music in different services and ways in the church. And so I play the guitar, I sing. Some days are better than others with singing, and I can fake it now on the piano a bit. Like I can, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing those beautiful and moving testimonies.
Just a minute, Joseph. Is this mic up? Okay.
Is mic on? Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, it's on now. Okay.
Hold it this way if you don't mind.
Sure. Okay, there we go. Thanks, Ed. Okay, so I hope you got that first part about thanking you. Yeah, all right, that's important. That's important, yeah. So my question has to do with, given that both of you have taken some distance from the traditions that you were brought up in, going, if you want, even further back, how do you see the dialogue of religions in this present age? How do you see Christianity in dialogue with other religions? Do you see Christianity, for example, as a sort of final and definitive revelation of God? Well, or if not, what are the possibilities?
I was an interfaith kid. So I had Jewish cousins due to my dad's cousin marrying a Jewish man, and they were raised Catholic and Jewish. I had Jewish friends at school, and from a very early age, I had questions. Why do you eat differently? What's different about this? And from the very first time I was taught that we are sort of saved by faith in Jesus Christ, et cetera, I came home and said that, but it can't be that God only loves Christians. And my father, who's a very classically trained Roman Catholic, said, you're right, God loves everybody. And so I've never believed that Christianity is the final religion, nor that it is the best religion. I believe that God speaks to the world in myriad ways. I do know that I need to be Christian because I tried to stop and it just didn't work. So, of course, I am a champion for Christianity. I would not have chosen ordination, but I'm also a champion for people celebrating the religion of their choice and of their heart. And for whatever reason, like others at this church, I absolutely love atheists and agnostics, and they love me, and we love to talk. I don't feel compelled to force anybody, and not being compelled is a big part of every world religion. So,
good question. I've been in some kind of Christian tradition for my whole life, and one thread that has marked my spiritual journey has been a continued expansion in the magnitude of who Jesus is, who God is. And as I evolve and grow, sometimes my worldview gets crushed and broken altogether, and God seems to resurrect a new and bigger image of God in Christ. And so I would call myself to this day a Christian inclusivist. I believe in the sort of generous orthodoxy, if you will, and an important piece in that is the role of the Spirit. I think the Spirit is at work across all of humanity. In John 3, Jesus, speaking to Nicodemus, talks about the wind, and the wind blows where it chooses, and you hear the sound of it. You hear the sound of it, but you don't know from where it is coming or where it is going. And so I affirm the fruits of the Spirit wherever they are found: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And I would love to have growing, stretching discussions across the religions, sometimes arguments, and then to go have dinner and drinks together after that. And that's the kind of life that I would want to live in faith.
Non-alcoholic drink.
We on? I just wanted to hear my voice. What do you see as some of the greatest challenges for us as a congregation?
I think, well, wow. All right, you went straight to it.
You're perfect. There's no challenges. We're all set.
I think one of your greatest challenges is your reputation. Thank you. He keeps doing that to me. I do say our in other conversations, interestingly enough. I think one of our greatest challenges is our reputation. Because if you have a picture of yourself that you hold on to, it's like a painting where the oil has settled on the canvas and it's been framed. And it's hard to allow new art to appear on that canvas. And so if we see ourselves as an ever-evolving piece of artwork, and maybe one of those huge Frank Serra paintings at the Guggenheim in Bilbao that just takes up a whole room and just keeps getting bigger and bigger, then I think it's wonderful. Obviously, our size is a challenge. I love it. I've never belonged to a church this large, and I love it. It's very possible for people to find empowerment and community and growth, spiritual, emotional, intellectual, in a church of this size. The question is, how do we make that easy? How do we make it possible for people who are less able to navigate such a large organization? I think those are two of the main challenges that I see at this time. But you have so many gifts. We have so many gifts. Thank you, Ed. I'll just keep doing it. We have so many gifts and so many advantages here and so many resources that it's a joy to work on these.
I'll just answer that briefly. I think I'll disclaim this to say that I think I need more time to really answer that question intelligently with an opinion from my perspective. But I would just say I would anticipate the challenge of shaping identity in a church when there is a large diverse perspective and sense of wherever we're coming from. And for in terms of education and formation, I would be really interested to learn more about, listen closely to the history of this place and what is the identity today, as much as we can give language to that, and then to ask the question, what's the next evolution, and sharpened focus to that identity, and then to shape formation and education around those questions. And so I would just observe and think that with a place of this size and all of the diversity and differences, to come up with a unified sense of identity and clarity is an ongoing process that I hope to help with in some way.
Is there a question back there? There's one over here, and then there's one right here. Tom, go ahead.
I'd like to can you hear me?
Yes.
I want to take the privilege of a moment to respond, Janine, to your saying that the church was nowhere around as you were growing up. Nobody in sight. I grew up in a family of 5 children in suburban Philadelphia, and my father died when I was 14. My youngest sister was 3, and my older brother was 20. Then my mother died 4 years later, when I was 18. And the kids were all still growing up. And through both of those death experiences in our family, we had one great Jesuit priest who came in and just loved us all, my mother and all 5 of us, and carried us through like nothing. So I happen to have a history of 22 years as a Jesuit priest myself, So I respond carefully to what you're saying about most of what the Catholic education and general culture is like, but it isn't always that way, and I just want the record to state that. Thank you.
So going back to the topic of Hispanic ministry and the wonderful work that's already here, what do you see as the greatest, I don't know whether I would call it challenge or barrier, as to encouraging somebody of Latino culture or somebody who simply prefers to worship in Spanish, instead of going to one congregation, be it Roman Catholic, instead coming to All Saints?
Well, and I've spoken at great length with the members of the 1PN team. I think our great opportunity and challenge, but I just see it as a really exciting opportunity, is to reach out to the people for whom the evangelical churches or the Roman Catholic Church or the Mormon Church are not the answer. Like me, they are looking for something else. There's a deep liturgical and historical tradition in the Episcopal Church that is similar to the Roman Catholic Church, but that has some doors open that are not open in other religions. And so they need it as much as those of us here need it, and the word needs to get out that we're here for them. In addition, Pasadena is a large community, and 30-40% of the people in this community are identified as Latino. Many of them Spanish-speaking, some Spanish-speaking only, and some bilingual. And so they need worship opportunities, a variety of houses of worship, just as other people do. And I hope we already, through our Office of Creative Connections and just the ongoing ministries of our church, we reach out in many ways to the Latino community in Pasadena, but I hope we also reach out with our with more programs at this church in the coming years.
I would like to ask you to come back in January and tell us where you are, what your impressions are, what some of your ideas and plans are. Can we make that happen, Ed?
Probably so, but I'm always loath to say what I'm going to do in January with the Rectors Forum. So I think it's a great idea. Let me say that. Thank you, Carolyn. Other questions? Over here, please.
As an institution and as individuals.
Can you put it this way?
Yes. Better? Thank you. Okay. As an institution and for us as individuals, what do you think is the key to integrating temporal power with spiritual humility?
Can you define temporal power? Can you define the term? Moment. Temporal power.
Are you asking John? Are you asking John? Or are you asking?
Great. You know.
I'm a third order Franciscan, and the three pillars of Franciscan spirituality are humility, love, and joy. One is expected to exhibit them. Humility is probably the trickiest of all virtues, because if you claim you have it, you now have ego. If you claim you don't have it, you're claiming you're so humble that you don't even think you're humble. It's a joke we Franciscans tell about it. When one is expected to sort of carry on the work of Christ, it takes an internal strength and power that can feel like temporal power and ego and can sometimes tip over into that. And so I think we as Christians are always called to revisit ourselves, to recollect ourselves in the Jesuit language, to hold ourselves accountable to Christ, and to remember that we're doing it for Christ and in Christ and through Christ. And that's how I stay grounded. And for me, there's a feeling, when we just start using language of, we're so great and we're the best at everything, and you can sort of tell. In seminary, there's just, we're always joking about, was that feeling of power me, or is that the Holy Spirit working through me? But it's great that you take note of that and call us to account about that, because that is the challenge in leadership and in ministry.
I will just respond real quick. And I think of Philippians 2, that Christ emptied himself, taking the form of a servant. He didn't consider equality with God as something to be grasped. And that's an image in Scripture that I continue to come back to. And I take that when I think about the role of being prophetic and being a bold and powerful voice. You know, pick any issue, whatever it is. I think I carry this image. In being prophetic, I carry this image with me, and I continue to ask myself the question, am I struggling to maintain a heart of love towards the other, towards whoever the enemy is? Because when the superiority and condescension sneaks in, then we just continue to participate in cycles of violence that don't help anything. And so I think that, as Ed brought out in the sermon today, the connection between meditation and morality and spiritual practices which help ground us in humility in this kind of living.
So I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you very much for a very important question. It brings to my mind the whole Leonard Cohen thing that I like to talk about. And he says that every one of the songs that he wrote, which are really considered to be great songs, were songs that came after he felt that he had his masterpiece, and then he had to let go of the masterpiece in order to receive the masterpiece. And I think that is a story about our lives daily. It is about a dying to our best thought about ourselves to then be given this amazing, gracious vision of who we are. It's really wonderful. And speaking of that, I wanted to say that, so when I talked about these people behind their backs to their references, this is this kind of feedback I got about Janine. Janine is a rock star. These were people who had been in classes with her, and the dean of her seminary, the priest who was her field supervisor, who said she was the best field placement priest we ever had since I've been here. And then the same kind of accolades were given about John. When I called our Bishop Bruno to say, okay, Bishop Bruno, I'm very, very interested in talking further with John Depphausen. We've had this really important series of conversations, and we're going against convention by asking someone to come and serve here, less than 15 miles from where he is serving, and I need to know if you're down with me on this. And he said, Ed, I am tickled pink that All Saints is looking at John. John Depphausen is one of the people who will make the difference in determining what the church is in the next 10 and 20 years. So with those kinds of accolades, my final question to you both is, what do you sense at this point that you need from us to be who you are in this place?
I can answer that. I would say, for me, enthusiastic support and encouragement for me to take care of my family and myself, and that's really the absolute first thing that comes to my mind. I know this is a demanding place to work, so I've heard, and I think figuring out the elusive, healthy rhythm of work and family time is going to be my highest priority. And so I ask your help in that. Ask your help in supporting being anchored in my family, because I promise you I will be a way better priest if you do that. So.
One thing, I experienced the radical welcome when I came here of people who heard about my disastrous move. I've experienced radical welcome from every single one of you, from the staff here and from the people of Pasadena. What I ask is that you offer that same radical welcome of Jesus Christ to whoever wanders onto our lawn or into our sanctuary or comes up to a booth when we're doing something in Pasadena, and let them know that Jesus loves them.
We are very blessed. So, one more time, this is an initial welcome. Let's welcome Janine and John.